Remakes have, in my opinion, unfortunately, become a very common occurrence these days. Now, technically, it's not necessarily a new thing, as movies have been remade and redone since the dawn of cinema, but it seems to be a lot more apparent nowadays. Some of these remakes are iconic, others aren't bad, and some are not great. And most these days are straight up trash. Today, I want to talk about a specific brand of remake, the horror remakes. Me personally, I prefer older horror movies. I mean, like, there are good modern ones, but today it seems like most of the movies themselves are self-aware. Like, they know what they are and therefore try too hard to be scary. For me, it takes me out of the movie when I see a super stylized scene, dark and brooding, and hear stereotypical generic violin stings with crazy and erratic shots. The only way I can describe it is, as I said before, it's like the movie itself is self-aware and knows it's a horror movie, and it ruins it for me. With that said, I wanted to look at a few examples. Each example will get its own video, but this time I just wanted to make a short video comparing one scene from It Chapter 2 and the original It miniseries. Now, before we get started, I want to say that I don't necessarily believe the original is better or scarier, but just that there are some moments that I do think the original did better. And these moments really help point out my earlier point about modern horror. I cannot say that word. Both movies are enjoyable and entertaining, and if you prefer the remake, that's totally fine and valid. For this video, there's one specific scene I wanted to talk about: Bev visiting her old home. First, let's go over the remake. So it begins with Bev standing outside the door in a dark and eerie hallway. It's quiet, but at this point, because of the dark lighting and atmosphere, we already know something is wrong. We're already expecting something to be scary. The old woman answers the door, hidden in shadow, letting us know she's not what she seems. We already don't trust her. She invites Bev in for tea, but Bev declines, and who can blame her? No sane person would trust this creepy old lady. The camera lingers on the old lady as she has a vacant smile on her face and closes the door. Now we see the interior. It's stuffy, dusty, and dark. The lights aren't even on. The woman snaps at Bev, which is odd. It doesn't throw us off though, because we already know she is not to be trusted. Bev wanders around the house. She goes into the old bathroom and she finds the poem. As she holds it up, rather unnaturally, so that we get a clearer view behind her, we see the old woman at the end of the hall, just standing there.
Menacingly!
She does a weird little movement as she walks away. Finally, we get back to the living room for tea. The old woman puts a record on. We see a wide shot of the two sitting down. As the woman sits down, she starts talking about creepy things like dying. She smiles and freezes, and then continues. We see a close-up of wounds on her chest, peeking through her shirt. But none of this is alarming or weird because we already knew from the start not to trust her, that something was wrong. It doesn't throw us off, it confirms what we already believed. The old woman gets up to go get cookies out of the oven, and the music distorts. Bev looks around at the pictures and sees Pennywise in one. The kitchen behind Bev is completely dark. Here's where, for me, the real problem occurs. We all know the saying, less is more, and here's a good example of why. Bev stands and we see the dark kitchen behind her. The old woman runs across naked, doing a weird little dance, which I'm sorry is way funnier to me than it is scary. Anyway, she starts talking about being a daddy's girl as her voice distorts. Then we get Bev's POV looking into the kitchen, and then a closer shot of her as she backs away. The voice shouts, breaking the tension they had built up. Then it goes silent. Finally, the funniest CGI monster I have ever seen comes bursting through the kitchen. Like, don't get me wrong, obviously if you saw that thing in real life, yeah, you'd probably freak out, but like, compared to the original, this is hilarious, but we'll get into that later. Now, let's count the cuts. there are 20 cuts. From the monster running out to Bev getting to the door. And about a million different angles. Now, do we really need like 8 shots of Bev running to a door? No, it's just too much and too fast. Now, probably my least favorite part. Pennywise putting on his clown makeup, acting all creepy with effects that honestly look like a TikTok. She runs outside. Finally, it's over. Now, let's look at the scene from the original. So it starts outside. It's a relatively sunny day. The birds are chirping. It's bright out and quiet as Bev rings the doorbell. An old woman looks out the window, then opens the door. Still, there's no dramatic or tense music and no dark lighting. The woman seems normal and kind. She tells Bev that her father died. It's a very normal and natural conversation. The woman invites Bev in with a sweet smile. Inside, the house is normal. No dark lighting, no tense music. It's bright and decorated as an old woman would have it. We're at ease, no need for alarm. Until we get to the bathroom. Now, here we are. The room where Bev's encounter with Pennywise happened. The room with all the blood. Bev is small in the frame, the bathroom large and empty feeling. It's darker than the rest of the house was. Bev is tense. She plugs the drain, splashes water on her face, and closes her eyes. The water drips. Suddenly, a muffled yell interrupts the silence. Then we hear the old woman call for Bev. The sink is now almost completely full of water. How long was she standing there? Finally, we get to the tea. There's a wide shot of the two of them sitting down as they small talk. Suddenly, we get a closer shot of the old woman as she slurps her tea quick and sloppy like a dog. She seems a bit more erratic than before. It's alarming because we weren't expecting it. Up until this point, everything has been normal. A close-up of Bev as she notices, and then a closer shot of the old woman, revealing rotten black and green teeth. Something is clearly wrong now. We slowly zoom in on Bev, and we get some eerie music. She looks down to find nothing but blood in her teacup. She drops it, and it shatters. The woman crouches on the floor to clean it up, but she keeps her head down as she warns Bev to leave. It starts to change, and we slowly hear Pennywise. The woman looks up, revealing a truly creepy and eerie corpse of Bev's father. We are in between the room and the door, effectively trapped with Bev as she runs from the corpse. The corpse quickly catches up to her, grabbing her shoulder. Although Bev is at the door, we are still trapped with the corpse, with Pennywise. Finally, Bev breaks away and escapes, and we see Pennywise cruelly mocking her. Bev nearly gets hit by a truck, and as she turns back to the house, she realizes that it was completely boarded up and abandoned the entire time. So, what's different? In the original, it sets up a normal evening. It lulls you into a false sense of safety. You feel as Bev does, a little uneasy knowing the history of the house, yet at ease because of the kind woman. Then we realize something is wrong at the same time that Bev does. We are trapped in the room with her. We, the audience, are experiencing this with Bev. Whereas in the remake, we watch, knowing from the beginning that something is wrong. We watch in safety at our homes. We watch as Bev finally realizes what's wrong. And we watch as she is chased. We watch it all as it happens to Bev. There are a few other points about this that take me out too. For example, the design of the monster. In the remake, it's this tall, cartoonish, over-the-top old lady monster with sagging boobs swinging side to side, and mouths on her neck, and huge bulging eyes. She moves in an exaggerated way with a silly voice. It's too childish and cartoony. It feels way too unreal to be believable. It comes off as silly rather than scary. The original was much more realistic and down-to-earth, being nothing more than an eyeless corpse of Bev's abusive father. It's practical makeup on an actor, so it's realistic proportions, not exaggerated. The skin looks real, the holes where his eyes should be is unnerving. The way he moves in an almost unnatural, yet human way. It's eerie. Even the design of Pennywise is something that bothers me. In the original, he looks like any other clown. Bright, fun colors and a big red nose with big red clown shoes to match. Simple face paint. In the remake, it's a creepy, highly stylized clown. An older clown suit, beige and gray, with an exaggerated forehead and face paint that is reminiscent of a death metal concert. Now tell me, If you were a small child, who would you rather go to? A normal, nice-looking clown, or this? And bam! OG Pennywise gets more meals. The same thing happened with the Annabelle doll in the Conjuring universe. The original doll was a Raggedy Ann doll, and the doll in the movie is this highly stylized, over-the-top creepy doll. In that case, I understand a bit more of why it was such a drastic change, though. A rag doll would be a lot harder to maneuver. And yes, of course, the remake of It didn't want to just copy the original, which I'm glad. I like that they took things in a new direction. There were a lot of things I actually liked better about the remake. First, Richie and Eddie. In the book, it was heavily implied that Richie and Eddie were both gay, and maybe even in love, although they were both too scared to admit it, considering the time period. In the remake, they make this very obvious and handled it very well, whereas in the original, not so much, although apparently, according to the actors, they tried to play it that way as much as they could. I liked that Eddie was, actually accurate to how he was in the book. In the original, they made him this, lame dork with no backbone. I also think Bev, although a little bit boring, at least has more agency and isn't a damsel in distress. Plus, she actually has red hair. I never understood why they didn't cast a redhead in the OG. And I also love the way that Eddie's death was portrayed in the remake way better than the original. Very sad, much tears. Anyway, to sum it up, horror movies these days, not always, but most of the time, seem to try a little too hard to scare you by using dark atmosphere, jarring editing, cliche monster designs, and stereotypical music. They rely on jump scares instead of building tension. They are too self-aware. They know what they are. They know they're supposed to be scary, and it makes them not as scary.